إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبد الله ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله عز وجل كما جاء في محكم التنزيل. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. Dear brothers and sisters, we begin with praise and gratitude. The essence of our existence and the ultimate reality of our conscious awareness is to know that we were created by this compassionate, merciful, loving force of truth that is the creator of all existence. So we abundantly praise Him as He deserves to be. And we seek to live a life in which we seek His guidance, that we seek to rise above the animal body that we live in and the carnal desires we find ourselves drawn to, and that we move into a lifestyle of seeking self-sacrifice for the betterment of the world around us because of our connection with God. We will all come up short and make mistakes. We have to be self-accounting. We have to realize there is evil within us and within around us that is taunting us and inciting us. So we seek refuge with Him from the evil and the cursed devil and all of his allies. I bear witness that there is no deity and nothing worthy of worship except for God alone. And I bear witness that Muhammad, the son of Abdullah, was His final messenger and prophet He sent to mankind, that they may have a clear track on the straight path back to Him. The Quran guides in so many ways. The Quran is a manual of guidance. It comes to us and gives us different angles of connecting with spirituality and understanding purpose. One of the prominent styles that Allah uses in the Quran is teaching us lessons through history. Letting us look into history to see the stories of prophets and what they have gone through, what people of faith have dealt with and what they learned from, what their contribution was. And that's why He says, كَذَلِكَ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ مَا قَدْ سَبَقَ وَقَدْ آتَيْنَاكَ مِنْ لَدُنَّا ذِكْرًا. So He says, and like this, with this message, we give you many examples of the historical truths that came before you. And with this, you have a mode, you have a means of remembering what is important to you in your life. History is undoubtedly one of the most crucial aspects of knowledge. To know what has happened, to learn lessons, particularly when it comes to faith and social reality. Because we're supposed to learn lessons. The truth is that in our modern capitalist, secularist society, the concept of history is like a side thing. If you want to study some history, we'll throw it in there in the little arts section. It's not so important. Somebody becomes a scholar of history, nobody puts that person in a position of great influence and great power because they hold the keys to knowledge that's important. They put them off to the side as some extra knowledge and information. George Orwell, the great literary master and historian, he said, the most effective way to destroy people is to deter and deny and obliterate their understanding of their own history. The great Marcus Garvey, the African-American intellectual of our history, he said, a people that do not know their history are like a tree without roots. Such beautiful, eloquent speech. The roots is where the water is taken in, and the nourishment where the tree can thrive and grow and bring branches and fruits. If it does not have roots, it's not going anywhere. When people talk about the history of Islam, unfortunately, a large part of that is our fault. They think about bloodshed, wars. This could not be further from the truth. The history and the legacy of Islam is that of civilization. It is that of intellectualizing our reality through a spiritual lens and having a spiritual purpose through seeking knowledge. This was a huge impact into the growth and development of civilization, even to the extent, if we study well, of the value of what America has brought to the world, was built on the backs of great Muslim theologians and scholars of the sciences in the mid-ages. So, while there were wars in a world where there was perpetual war because the nature of the world's relations was that of empires. In the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and for many centuries thereafter, there was no such thing as democracy or secularism or freedom and rights. There was empires. You had your empire, your emperor, and in most cases they had a religion. That's how it was. So if you were going to survive, much less to promote your cause, you better have a strong military. Otherwise you'll get gobbled up in imperial history. So yes, there were wars that took place. And if you study that, you will see that it was not about making people to believe or to make them into Muslims. When we study Indonesian and Malaysian history, we find, through the world's objective lens of history, we see that some 200 million people are Muslim now, and there was no caliphate. There was no war ever fought anywhere near the borders of Indonesia or Malaysia. And the dominant religion of over 200 million people is Islam. If you study how that happened, you will find that Muslims who went there as traders and people doing business, their contribution, their character, their attitude, when asked and when needed and when wise, they explain what they believe and what that motivation is that drives them. People slowly but surely embrace this faith. Even more than that, let's take it a step further and look at the Mongols. I'm sure there's some Khans here, right? Got a couple Khans in the room? Genghis Khan, right? The Mongolian army. These Mongols destroyed the caliphate. The most formidable, barbaric warriors in the history of mankind would have piles of bodies 50 feet high to prove their military might. They came crashing through the caliphate in the Islamic world. At least a third of the Muslim world was dominated and taken over by this Mongol invasion. But within 100 years of their rule of the Muslims, they chose to become Muslim. It just proves without a shadow of a doubt that our faith has some very valuable contribution. Now, the most underappreciated part of world history and Islamic history is unquestionably that of the beautiful African history that we have in our religion, in world history. I was born and raised in Oklahoma, a white guy. As far as I knew, Africa is a place of poverty and slavery. Those are the weak people. That's the way I was raised. I'm sure much of America, particularly the South, was raised like that. So it is crucial for us to actually know what the history is, and if we find out, we will be amazed. So let's take you to the original Wakanda. The Malian dynasty, the Malian empire of 300 plus years, from the 1200s to the 1500s. West and Central Africa was a huge civilization of amazing might. Started by a man named Mansa Sundiata Keita. Now obviously his name doesn't sound too Muslim. And what we learn is that through his travels as the newfound ruler of this amazing belt of a unified Ghana and Mali and Sudanese area, all of this big mid to West African area became a unified 40 nations, 40 groups of powerful people. So through Sundiata's journeys, rahimahullah ta'ala, he clearly became Muslim in that he named his kids Wali and Khalifa. This is not our claim. This is what the history books tell us about them. And his son, Wali, who took the Mansa position, which means king, after him, Mansa Wali established the religion of Islam as the official court religion. Uniquely and interestingly enough, he did not establish it as the religion of the empire. He respected the native traditional beliefs and values that were there, and he would even take part of them as long as it did not compromise his monotheism. His idea as he ruled was that we need to develop our contributions and our resources. So the salt mining and the gold mining and the agricultural development under Mansa Wali became vast. They became very rich. And then 3 Mansas later, we have the coming of the great Mansa Musa. Now, according to the world historians, even Business Insider a few years ago wrote an article about the richest man in history. The richest man in history was Mansa Musa, whose wealth, according to anthropologists who are not Muslim, superseded and went past $400 billion in modern wealth. That's 5 times the value and worth of Bill Gates. Mansa Musa was no question about it, the richest, wealthiest man in history, as well as his kingdom was the richest and wealthiest kingdom in history. And he was an African, black, Muslim man. Now I'm going to ask you a question. You should reflect, and I know the answer. How many of you knew that? And the fact that most of you probably did not know of that, why? Why is that not taught? Why do most Muslims not even know this? White supremacy is not just some fools with white head covers on, hoods. It's a much deeper, multifaceted grip on recent world history. And we have to be aware of this and all of its manifestations, because it is something that is powerful. Muslims look to their worth and value through that lens nowadays. In the most powerful places in the Muslim world, that's how they're thinking. So Mansa Musa, let's look at his life and legacy. He inherited his power as the Kita because his predecessor, Abu Bakr II, took dozens of ships and declared, with all of our wealth and what we've done, we've established a good nation. Let's see how far the Atlantic goes. Let's cross the Atlantic. And he put Musa as his successor if he does not come back. Many months later, he never came back. And there are some stories about some from his group that came back. All of those are spurious and have strange stories in them. But American history, if you study, would have it that some of them found their way. And this may sound like crazy to you, but if you study the anthropology of the eastern seaboard of the United States and South America, you will find relics that can be dated before Christopher Columbus. Because when was Abu Bakr? He was in the late 1200s, early 1300s, is when he set off with dozens of ships to the west. And so Mansa took the role of authority, and it is well documented that he kept his 5 daily prayers. It is well documented that he made the social directives of society reflect Islamic values, and that he encouraged the people to learn Islam, but those who did not embrace it, he had no problem with them. He saw them as respected citizens and people of his dynasty. Under Mansa Musa, the beautiful Malian empire did not know poverty. It became majority literate long before the Enlightenment of Europe. At this time, this African civilization was the highest producer of sophisticated agricultural production, gold and salt in the world. Hundreds of modern day billions of dollars of wealth was in this land, and most people were literate. At that time, they were calling it in Europe, the white folks were in the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, in which most people were illiterate and living on superstition and going under tyranny of corrupt rulership that used the church oppressively and not correctly against them. While this Muslim African dynasty, the religion of Islam is building intellectualism. So Musa, he prepared his great journey to Hajj. And as he's preparing, he sends out messages to all of the neighboring empires and people, particularly the Muslims. And so he took an entourage of thousands of people to Hajj on his account. And he made hundreds of camels. Sole purpose was to carry large loads of gold. As Mansa Musa rahimahullah ta'ala would go through Africa, every Friday he would destabilize the economy of the region by giving gold to the poor, building houses for poor families, and building mosques, and leaving people dedicated to fulfill that mission. He came into Cairo, which was in the Mamalik period at that time, and Cairo had a big problem of poverty at that time. And he unloaded so much gold that the price of gold went crashing down for some time thereafter. And so I think it was Nasruddin, the ruler, they had the policy back then. They were not too spiritual. That if you enter my court, I don't care who you are, Mr. Musa, you will prostrate at the entrance of the court. He said, I will prostrate to the Qibla, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and if you want to stand in the middle, that's your business, how you see it. And he did. And he addressed him with the need to have Islamic values. So he goes to pilgrimage to Mecca, and he meets all these scholars along the way. Along the way, he would meet scholars of religion and science, architecture. He met a guy that had traveled all the way from Spain. And he told all of them, look, come with me to the Malian Empire. I will make you a rich man. We want your intellectual wisdom to add to the tapestry of the civilization we have. And he brought back a whole bunch of scholars and intellectuals and architects. And when he came back, he built, before that, Niani was the capital. And it was known for agriculture, some gold, some pearls, some ivory, worldly material things. Mansa Musa transferred all that to a place called Timbuktu, in which intellectual wealth was seen as the wealth of the nation. And they had hundreds of thousands of manuscripts written in all of the sciences, established the great Senghor University. The great Senghor University had 25,000 students from all over Africa to come study. And when they studied in this university, remember, this is in the 1300s, early 1300s. This could well be considered the 5th university in the sophisticated format we know today in the history of mankind. The first being Qarawiyyin in Morocco, instituted by Muslims. The second being Al-Azhar in Cairo, instituted by Muslims. The third one being Baytul Hikmah in Baghdad, and the Nizamiyin in Turkmenistan or Persia, and then this would have been the fifth one. Europe is in the Dark Ages. You're just an apprentice of a blacksmith or a this or from the local court. Civilization isn't there. They don't have it. Long ago they had something like civilization in Rome and Greece. That's gone centuries ago. They had to learn it all again from us, from the Muslim community. So Mansa Musa established Timbuktu and the Secular University. It became a huge, beautiful legacy of knowledge, of growth. Thriving civilization of safety and comfort where social, moral values govern. So that institution went on through the decadence that happened in politics after him. Over 20 years after the death of Mansa Musa, the land was known to have comfort and ease and social unity and justice. Just to let you know that a couple hundred years after Mansa Musa, rahimahullah ta'ala, was a great scholar named Ahmed Baba, a Sudani. The great Sudanese scholar that has a whole library there in Timbuktu. He wrote 60 manuscripts in many disciplines. This scholar of Islamic theology wrote books in creed, in Islamic law, in Arabic grammar and morphology and linguistics. He wrote books on physics, astronomy, chemistry, geometry. This is our ummah. This is our legacy. This is who we were. Unfortunately, later it comes to infighting, tribal infighting, tribalism, the religion lost its place, scholars became, marginalized in their influence. And towards the end of the 17th century, the colonization of Europe. After the Europeans re-established themselves, they decided to go out and colonize the world. So they came to Africa and they had a big plan to take all of those resources they had seen in the big cartography that Italian cartographers, map makers would make, where they had Africa, and in the middle this beautiful big African king, Mansa Musa, sitting in the middle of Africa with gold all around him as far as you can see. Let's go find those resources. And they found huge resources of gold and diamonds and salt and other resources. Today there's oil coming out of there, all going at a value that is not helping the population grow in its wealth. It's supporting Western interests and concerns. So when you see a movie come out like the Black Panther, you can see something very special happening in the dynamic of the Hollywood modern entertainment capitalist infrastructure. Hollywood has long been racist. Hollywood has long been focused to make a black person or a Mexican or a Muslim or a brown person look in a specific light, and the vast majority is low, negative, problematic. So this is a movie now that is produced, directed, acted, and promoted by black people and African people. And it's breaking all the records of the box office. And its story is very much rooted in the vision of Mansa Musa and the Malian dynasty, using the artistry of the fantastic ideas of Stan Lee and the Marvel universe. They imaged something similar. And by the way, the director Kugler is going to make a life story of Mansa Musa into a movie. He has said that. I read it on the internet. So I'm not going to spoil the movie for you. But what I will tell you is that as Muslims, we should look for value and promote goodness and justice and good meanings and messages wherever we go. And just as we should stand up against and speak out against evil and corruption. And there is a couple of elements in this movie that are not Islamic, but the vast majority of it is a beautiful message that is very much Islamic, rooted in the Islamic history. And so it's important us to embrace the Prophet ﷺ's mentality. يُعْجِبُنِي الْفَأْلِ أُحِبُّ الْفَأْلِ الصَّالِحِ. I love optimism.
I love people to mention positive things. And they said, how is that? He said, kalima tayyiba. Say good things to people. Don't go around being all negative. Don't go around nitpicking, trying to look in something big and say, here's what's wrong with that. Don't be that guy. Unfortunately, amongst the religiosity of the Muslim community, this has become a mainstay. People can look at something beautiful, like this, the Black Panther, and they say, oh, but look at that and that. See these two scenes right here? That movie's haram. And wallahi, that's not the attitude we want to have. I'm not telling you you have to see it and it's an obligation to see it and this is some Islamic thing to see it. I'm saying for those who do, there is benefit to be derived. And there is a good message. And what I will tell you is that it's important for us to understand who we are as it relates to this movement of the black community in America, and also now with this movement of these children in America. You will not achieve greatness unless you struggle and strive against the current that seeks to keep you down and oppress you. If you just walk in your hamster wheel and keep running as they expect you to do, and yes master, to them, that's what they want from you. But if you disrupt the corruption and the oppression and bring the light of Allah and the values that you know and the history that you represent, the world will become a better place, and it's a tough journey ahead. But we must embrace that journey as our great predecessors did. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه فإنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. In summary, the relationship between our beautiful history in the Malian dynasty and the great Mansa Musa rahimahullah ta'ala and this new movie, The Black Panther, we learned some lessons. Number one, we have to build our infrastructure. We have to be concerned immediately with our community, with the Muslim community of Charlotte and the greater community of Charlotte. We have to be deeply concerned. Our priority list needs to be building our infrastructure, cultivating leadership that has an identity, that has a history to be proud of, that has a system of values that will make society a better place, that will bring about civilization and goodness. Anger and revenge and hatred only breed ignorance and oppression. We have to use the tools of revelation and learning from the great points in our history and in our scripture in order to achieve the greatness that God has declared through His Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is first through seeking knowledge. The power of the hamster wheel is to keep you busy trying to make a buck, to keep you very busy making your money, and then for you to turn on your television set and to listen to the music and to waste your time and your life away without knowing a purpose and a meaning that you represent and meeting your Lord in such a useless state. We have to seek knowledge. The more you take a path of rigorous knowledge seeking, the more you will grow into a person of wisdom. Meaning now I understand how knowledge, its implications and proper applications. Then that will lead to an identity that is preserved and well-founded. And that will cultivate, and we will see leadership emerge from that group. Then people will want to join us and we will build a coalition of morality. People who realize and see the light of the knowledge and wisdom and leadership in what will make the world a better place. So then we see social welfare come. And ultimately it's our contribution and the actions that we have done that we will be resurrected on the intentions and the actions which will be our ultimate worth. So I seek divine providence. Ya Allah, we beseech you from the bottom of our hearts, inspire us to embrace the legacy of your prophethood, the legacy of those who followed and established the civilization on your guidance. Ya Allah, inspire our hearts to be people of self-worth, people of knowledge and value, people with a history, people who have something to offer the world. Ya Allah, help us to become people who establish a civilization, who establish leadership that can solve the tyranny and corruption and oppression that has become institutionalized in this world. Ya Allah, help the power of knowledge and wisdom and spirituality overcome the power of money and weapons. Ya Allah, help us to look into our purpose and be focused and have a priority driven by the message that you sent your Prophet ﷺ with. Ya Allah, we ask you to forgive us for all of our sins, for our laziness in our soul's responsibility that we have been given. We ask you forgiveness for our shortcomings in our knowledge and practice of the way that you have created us for. Ya Allah, we ask you to send your peace and blessings and mercy upon your final messenger Muhammad and all of those who follow him until the day of judgment. Aqim as-salah.